here's the whole problem with this whole kind of thinking, the kind of narrowness, boxed-in thinking. Who cares about the cosmos, right? Who's even thinking about nature? We have, in a sense, become lost in space, detached from the natural world, detached from the creation God so loved and is loving that God is at work in it. You know, and here we are sort of falling off the edge of the earth. You know, we're losing hope, and that's what I find today. A lot of people are losing hope, and we're sort of in this existential despair. In fact, there's sort of a global low-level depression, you know, going around because we don't know how to harness the best of what we are. Because we've religion, and not just Christianity, all religions, in a sense, have stifled and constrained us and kept us from our connectivity to the whole of the cosmos. And whole is the operative word here. Thanks for introducing making all things new. Catholicity, you know, does not mean the Pope or the Vatican, although we might think that sometimes. It's a word that the Greeks actually coined when the Greeks realized that we don't live in a two-tiered universe, we live in a three-dimensional universe. The Greeks had the idea that we are observers of this whole, and the word katholikos means according to the whole. We are to be we stand under the stars. We stand in the midst of the whole, and we have a role to play in this whole. But as my friend John Haught said, you know, a religion built on stability and immutability is not prepared for a cosmic order based on change. And this is our challenge today. We have constructed, whether Catholic or Protestant, we have constructed an understanding of Christianity based on a fixed, static cosmos. And culturally, we have become quasi-Newtonians. And that's why the new paradigm sort of moves the earth beneath our feet. But I want to say this, that unless we get on board with the world we actually live in, it is going to proceed, in a sense, without us in very probably ways we could never imagine. So I want to say welcome to our world. Welcome to the cosmos we actually live in. Thomas Aquinas, you know, once said, a mistake about creation is a mistake about God. I think we need to sit with that for a little bit. How do we understand creation? That's how we understand God. So we're going to do a little sojourn through the basic three levels of science, the large, the small, and the complex. I hope you're ready for this on a Saturday morning. Big Bang, quantum, evolution. You know, the whole thing really got turned over by this little guy, this little Swiss patent officer, who, you know, had a hard time getting a job and basically did not do that well in mathematics, even though he was a genius. And that's Albert Einstein. Einstein was not happy with Newton's ideas of absolute space and absolute time. Now, if you have nothing else to do this afternoon, you can do what Einstein did, and that was to imagine what it would be like to ride a beam of light at the speed of light. Isn't that fantastic? The most pervasive thing in our whole universe is light. It just infiltrates everything about us. And what Einstein, you know, basically he went to his room, really, went to his bedroom, told his wife, I'll be there for about a week. Don't bother me, just send up the meals. And she said, that's fine, dear. You know, go ahead, do it. And he came down after a week with like one sheet of paper with all mathematical equations. And he said, Elsie, dear, this is going to change everything we know about the universe. And she said, that's lovely, dear. What do you want for breakfast? So basically, what Einstein showed is there's no such thing as absolute space and absolute time. In fact, it's space-time, and space-time is created with the universe. In other words, this universe is not fixed like building blocks or Legos, like Newton thought. It's more like Gumby or Slinky. You know, it stretches. It's got this dynamic nature to it, and the way it sort of stretches and sinks and sags is due to the heaviness within it, you know, the gravity or the weight of objects. So this is our universe, right? It's very, 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 very old. And if you're feeling old today, think of the universe, right? It's about 13.8 billion years old. Now, who could get their heads around a billion years? I mean, we say this number, but it's mind-blowing, right? And all we know is that about, almost 14 billion years ago, this universe just came into existence. How is the work of science, right? That's the work of cosmologists and physicists. They call it a singularity, this point of sort of our mathematics breaks down and just sort of leaped into existence. What, out of a previous universe, a black hole, colliding universes? Who knows? All we know is it began as a hot, dense something, sort of a quantum existence, and then it rapidly expanded, and as it expanded, it started cooling, and as it cooled, the forces of the universe were established, the forces that allow you to sit and me to stand, and that we're not colliding into one another. The universe has been expanding ever since, and it is expanding at an ever rapid rate. We know that because galaxies are moving away from us. The universe may expand indefinitely into the future, a cold, dark future for this universe. The psalmist says 80 for most, 70 for most, 80 if you're strong, right? 90 with good drugs, 100 if you become a transhumanist. We're here for a very, very, very short amount of time. Really short in the big, expansive time of the universe. So what are we doing here? Scientists will say, just happens we're here, Just so happens the conditions were right and we're here. We have another story to tell from the point of faith, from the point of what God may be doing here. All we know is that it could go on for about 100 trillion years. So we will probably not be around for the end of it. And we need to rethink the second coming, by the way. We'll get to that. We are large, very large. We live in a suburban galaxy, right? We're sort of like a mid-neighborhood thing, the Milky Way. We have about 200 billion stars around us. It's just immense, immense. If you ever looked at the night sky, I bet you have a beautiful night sky here in Denver, It's just incredible. Usually these are, in clusters, and all I can say is this. If we think we're the only form of intelligent life in this universe, I would say we need a little dose of humility, right? And we also need to think that God is not so boring, really. I mean, God does have great imagination, right? And God can do, just loves to love, really, and we'll talk about that soon, too. It's an expanding universe, and sometimes we can feel ourselves expanding as well. This is how we know we're part of the cosmos, right? So much for Weight Watchers. I think they're anti-cosmologists. This planet Earth, we're newcomers in the cosmos. We're only about 4.6 billion years old. So we are kids on the block, so to speak. And our planet probably came from the dust of supernova explosions that began to circle the young sun along and develop our planet along with others. And all we're saying here is this, that the stuff that makes us, right? The carbon in our blood, the nitrogen, the helium, the hydrogen, these elements, these basic elements were already in the Big Bang. In a sense, we are stardust. That's not just a euphemism or a new agey thought here in Denver. That's the most truest thing we can say about ourselves. We are in the universe, in the Big Bang, and the Big Bang is in us. And we can't get our heads around. That's the first thing we need to get our heads around, right? Second thing is it's a world of energy. Now here's where I think religion has a little catch-up to do. Because truthfully, when we talk about energy, let's take the language of spirit, spirituality. What is spirit? That's not a question for you to answer, but but what we are saying, because we talk like body and soul, matter and spirit, and inevitably people always ask me, what happens to the soul when we die? Now, the Catholic Church teaches that the soul, created immediately by God, will share immortal life. The body is created from the dust of the ground and will return to the ground. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. God is one friend you can trust, right? So, and we go, yeah, amen, amen. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good. Seriously, we are profound dualists. Welcome to Einstein's world. Energy and matter are equivalent, right? Energy and mass can be exchanged with one another. All matter is energy, and all energy is matter. And guess what? We are really energy shown up in mass called bodies. And we still have not got our heads around that. The whole person dies, the whole person's transformed. We don't split up into two parts, And here's the thing here's where you might say the rubber hits the road. Because, like, when we talk about the language of being, like divine being, often, people talk about God like they really know God. Oh yeah, we're talking about God, divine being. I'm like, well, what's being? Oh, well, being is self-subsistent being. Really? Seriously. Human beings, like we know what a human being is, right? Yeah, immutable substance of rational nature. Thank you, Boethius from the 9th century. So, what is being? Well, welcome to the world we actually live in. The stuff that we call being is spooky weird. Really. We really should say we're human spooky weird beings. It's plural. It's not wave and it's not particle. It's kind of this wave-particle duality. And, quantum physicists, they have to be really, I think they probably live in Denver and go on these cannabis tours or something periodically, because they have great imagination and creativity. How they came to understand this world of waves and particles. And this is, by the way, all based on light, based on electrons, based on photons. Like we get up on a Saturday morning and you shoot a beam of electrons through a slit. That's how they discovered, hey, we should see another beam of electrons, but if you do two slits, you get this crazy interference pattern. It's called wave-particle duality. And what scientists discovered is it's both. It's wave and particle at the same time. And the only way we know what something is if we measure it. And from the quantum world, we have to say it is a participatory universe. There is no real until we, in a sense, name the real. This is now from the quantum level. But it's telling us about the fundamental stuff of life. And what we are saying here is that matter is not composed of basic building blocks. Matter is composed of interweaving energy fields. Fields within fields that are all sort of impacting one another. So that Brian Swim says, everything is sort of genetically related. We live in a communion bound with everything else. So that the most apt description of our life in this universe is interconnectivity. Goodbye, Newton's world. No more block universe. Now, one of the phenomenon that Einstein had trouble with, because, Einstein did not really buy into quantum mechanics at first. He didn't think it was, this kind of dicey, chancy universe. He said God does not play with dice, right? But Niels Bohr said, oh yeah, Al, God does. It's a dicey, chancy universe. And then Albert's postdoctoral students said, hey, Al, if we if we take two particles that have interacted and we split them apart, I mean, if we really are connected by energy fields, shouldn't these two particles impact one another? And Albert said, really. So they went ahead, and they thought up the experiment. And indeed, if you take a particle and you put it here, take particles that have interacted and you put one particle here on the podium in Denver and the other particle on the moon. If I were to turn this particle upward 180 degrees, the particle on the moon will turn downward 180 degrees. And you think to yourself, what? Yes, they call this spooky action at a distance, or non-local action at distance. Now, here's where it gets a little bit more close to home. Now, I don't have a slide here about chaos theory, but we're finding ourselves today living not in closed boxes, but sort of in open systems, right? Where you might say that local actions can have global effects. And we don't realize sometimes that our local actions can actually have impact around the world. Whoever thought that possibly we could be somehow involved in the crisis in Syria or the drought in sub-Saharan Africa, because I'm unconsciously running my water all the time, or I insist on buying up all the water at the local supermarket because we're going to have a shutdown here. And we don't think this way. We don't think that what we're doing is actually part of interconnected, interlocking fields of energy. Or the fact of consciousness. We're going to talk about consciousness soon, but that the way we think impacts the world around us. Now, I often, if you've heard me talk before, I often give the example of you've worked with someone for many years. You were good friends, and your friend retires and goes to live in Alaska, and you're here in Denver, and you're thinking, gee, I wonder how Sue is doing, and then out of the blue, Sue calls. And, we used to say, what a coincidence. I was just thinking about you. Now we know we're quantumly entangled, right? So be careful who your friends are, really. You're with them for life. What scientists tell us today is that nature is not composed of material substances so much as deeply entangled fields of energy. The nature of the universe is indeed undivided wholeness, and that is a mind-changing paradigm for us. To realize that if we're living here on this level, if you were to go down to the fundamental levels of life on our planet, and you were, in a sense, to turn the fabric inside out, you would see that we and Muslims and Chinese and atheists and Jews and even ISIS, and that's scary for us, right? We are all in interlocking fields, and it makes a difference how we live our lives today and the choices we make. Paul Dirac, in his dinner speech before he won the Nobel Prize, he said this, he said, pick a flower on earth and you move the farthest star. That's how interconnected we are. Now think of how many flowers we have picked, cut down, trees we've chopped down, ecological areas we have basically, in a sense, destroyed to build. Not even thinking that these actions will have cosmic effects. Have we, in a sense, altered not just our Earth, have we altered the whole of cosmic life? Have we disrupted the planets and the stars because we have been unthinking, detached from the cosmos that is our home? So, this is one of my favorite sayings from the physicist David Bohm, who was a contemporary quantum physicist, a contemporary of Albert Einstein. And you can Google Bohm and find some of his interviews. I just showed it in class this week. It's really fantastic. And, his ideas were not accepted entirely by, and they still are not, by, some areas of physicists. But this is what Bohm realized. In a quantum world, he's asking, what holds the whole together? That's his basic question. And he spoke about a quantum potential that comes very close to God, but he didn't use the language of God. He simply calls it a quantum potential. And in his book, Implicate Order, he speaks of an implicate order, an order of the whole at the whole of life. And he says, as human beings and societies, we seem separate because we're quasi-Newtonians and we act like we're separate. He says, but in our roots, we are part of an indivisible whole and share in the same cosmic process. That's a leap for us, but a shift we must make. And quite honestly, I see the shift being made in younger generations, in the millennial generations, because they are digital natives. They are born wired to a device. We are mostly, if I look around the room, we're analogs. It's okay. I grew up in New Jersey as an analog and survived. But young people already are wired for interconnectivity. They have a sense of belonging to a whole in a way that older generations do not. So do not lose hope in the younger generations, because they are very hopeful for a new future and a new kind of religious future. Now, what we are saying is that we are moving from mechanism to holism. This is part of the paradigm shift we find ourselves in today. In fact, the word holon, coined by Arthur Koestler, actually in the mid-50s, I think is apropos to describe us. We're not mechanistic parts, we're holons or whole parts, right? Each of us is a whole that's part of a larger whole. So we're wholes within holes within holes. And anytime someone says, don't bother me, I'm not part of that, they are being an anti-holon. You can have also probably a sweatshirt for that as well. So we are moving from closed systems to open systems. And this shift, this move today from closed to open is not just about religion. It is every system that is alive today. I think our political system is suffering because it insists on operating as a closed system. Our economic system is faltering, it's conflicted, because parts of it still, although it's doing better to move to an open system, being in a global world. Cultural systems are shifting. And this is our basic thing. A closed system is self-contained, self-maintained. It's here's my box, here's my seat, here's my house, here's what I do for a job, here's what I do for a living. Please do not bother me, okay? I'm fine just maintaining myself. An open system is far from equilibrium. If you're having a bad day, that's probably a good sign, right? That's what it means. Life is never really in balance. Now, I don't mean that, centering prayer, we're going to have a lot to say about centering prayer here, because there is a point of being integrated that can really be not just beneficial, but fruitful for living in an open system world. Because an open system is always, in a sense, open to the environment and therefore can be affected by the environment. The system can change as the environment changes. So, one of the classic paradigms in chaos theory is the little butterfly, flapping its wings here in Denver, right? And we have this lovely day here, and the little butterfly is flapping its wings, but that little flap of wings is actually creating a new basin of attraction within the weather system that's pulling this system into new patterns of order, so that we're probably might be setting off torrential rains in Japan. I think Jesus, quite honestly, Christianity from the beginning was an open system. Jesus was like a strange attractor, right? He was a Jew who was a new basin of attraction in the midst of a very juridical Judaic system. And that's why people were like, who is this guy? Isn't he the son of Joseph and Mary? Why is he doing these things? So strange attractors pull the system into something new. And I think that's what we are about. Certainly from the Christian perspective, we're about open system newness. So that we find ourselves today not simply in a world that's expanding, a universe that's expanding, and a world that's deeply entangled on the quantum level. Now we find ourselves in a world of increasing complexity. Now the word evolution really still bothers a lot of people. A number of years ago, we had this young woman visit us. She was a lovely woman. She was a stewardess for American Airlines, and she was from an evangelical church, and I didn't realize at the time just how the big E really shaped her mindset. So she said to me, well, what are you working on these days? And I said, well, I'm working on evolution and Christianity. And she said, well, evolution, she said, is just a theory. I said, it's more than just a theory. I said, most of modern science is based on the principles of evolution. She said, no, it's just a theory. She said, God created humans less than 10,000 years ago and placed them on Earth. And I said, no, that's just a story. She looked at me like, no, that's really how it is. And I thought, we're not going to get too far. It's really nice knowing you. So, you got to take people, you got to accept where they are. And I'm not saying, okay, you've got to believe this. All I'm saying, this is how nature works. All right? The word is associated with Charles Darwin. He did not invent the word. The word was around long before Darwin. He was looking for a word to describe diversity of species and how change works in nature. He is sort of the new Copernicus. Darwin was the Copernicus of biology, basically. And therefore, when I talk about evolution, I'm using it descriptively to say that we're living in a type of world that is not static, it's dynamic. It is not fixed. It is changing. It is not a mechanism, it's a process. In other words, nature works by lawfulness and orderliness. But all you'd have to do is go sit with your flowers for a little bit. Really, you don't have to be a scientist to figure this out. That nature will have its own rules, right? But it's got an openness to it. Hey, it looks like skies are changing, sun's moving around. I think we should close up shop for a little bit. We'll call it fall. So nature has this kind of built-in spontaneity and playfulness. We, on the other hand, quasi-Newtonians, like to control nature. This is how it is. Okay, so we're living in evolution. And evolution here, we're just talking about we're living sort of in the big books of life. If you were to think about the whole cosmic story as 30 volumes. Those of you who are bibliophiles, think of the whole universe story as 30 volumes. Like, remember the Encyclopedia Britannica? Now they have the Encyclopedia Evolutionary. Volume 1, Big Bang. Volume 21, the Earth. 20 volumes later. Volume 29, the Cambrian period, and volume 30, dinosaurs. Now, I was in the Pittsburgh airport a few weeks ago, and I saw a dinosaur. I couldn't believe it. And I thought, I'm related to that? Oh, my God. The thing was enormous. The skeletons, of course, not a real living thing. It was enormous, like Jurassic Park, They're our volume. And they're around page 385. Mammals appear, around shortly after, and then we humans. Volume 30, the last line, last two words of the last line are human beings. That would be us. And here's the thing, no period. No period, all right? We're not the end of the story. We are the last two words of the story that is continuing through us. So we are not simply the outflow of evolution, we are evolution now on a different level of self-consciousness. What Teilhard saw is that there are three basic drivers of evolution. Things come together. Convergence. Given sufficient amount of time, you will have an attraction between elements, hydrogen and oxygen, water. And as things come together, they form new degrees of relationship, complexity. And what Teilhard added to that is that as things complexify, consciousness emerges. So we're not in evolution, we are evolution. And here's where I find religious people or religious type thinkers, they're like, huh? What does that mean? If you go to like California, like Google, they've got it. Oh yeah, they're like, we're evolution. We're going to evolve, into something. By, the next 30 years, we're exiting out of Homo sapiens. So we have a whole plan to evolve. All we're saying is that these are our cousins, cyanobacteria, and here we are. We have evolved fastest today. Right? I look around the room. I bet many of you remember the phone on the wall. Remember that? Phone on the wall with a cord? You ask an 18-year-old, they're like, what is that? I have to go to the museum to look at it, right? I remember when that gives you my age away, when the first cell phone came out, 70s or so, it was like this big. And I remember someone saying, you're not going to believe this, but AT&T has a phone you'll be able to carry around. And I thought, that's incredible. In New Jersey, we just thought, wow, that's really a step up. Who would have thought? We are talking 40 years or so. We have gone from the phone that was this big to holding a computer in our hands. If someone said that to us 30 years ago, we would have said, you are out of your mind, that I'd be able to connect with the entire globe with the push of a button. We would have said, absolutely not. And here's the thing, technology is about creativity and imagination. And this is what I think we lack sometimes. We need to step up on creativity and imagination. But we are still evolving because half of us are still evolving at a slower pace, right? So it's a long future ahead of us, a long future. Here's the key. We are living now in evolution as evolution. Here's the first point I want you to get into your heads. We are unfinished. We are unfinished as a human species. We are unfinished as an Earth planet. We are unfinished as a cosmos. The whole thing is still being created. We are works in progress. So we are being created and we are at the same time creating, which means that the whole of life is, in a sense, leaning on the future. The future is probably our greatest reality. Time is irreversible. No matter what has happened in the past, that past has brought us to this present, and that past is somehow even enfolded into this present. And that's why people are always looking back. And if we look back, we are always with dead remains. We are never in the living moment. The only way to live life is to live on the cusp of the moment, of the now, into the future. And life evolves by creative power. Creativity is the stuff of life because it is the stuff of God. So I'm looking at my time here. Do you want to take a little break or do you want me to just finish my last segment? Finish it. Oh, you're a good group and you're large. That's great. Okay. Here's really where I want to lead us. So we talked about evolution, right? We talked about this interconnected cosmos. And we said that evolution is convergence, complexity, and consciousness. Now, consciousness is the big word. And I'm sure you have been spending time, you have thought about this, discussed it. Yeah, that sounds bad, but I mean, in a good way. What Teilhard said is that evolution is the rise of consciousness. In other words, evolution is not just new species coming along. Evolution is the rise of consciousness. The whole point of evolution is the deepening of consciousness. And he'll speak a bit about this consciousness as a withinness and a withoutness. Now, here's the thing that's really sort of a shift, because we think of consciousness as something that, like, humans have. You know, like, oh, we came and we have consciousness. You know, as if, of course, animals or non-human nature have no consciousness. They're just it. But what science is showing more and more, and this is mostly from the world of quantum physics, is that consciousness is sort of what Big Bang is about. In the beginning was consciousness. I mean, we could even write that as the new Genesis story. You know, in the beginning was consciousness. And what Dana Zohar writes in her book, The Quantum Self, she says that, you know, shortly after the Big Bang, there was sort of this stuff. It almost looks like soap bubbles, you know, space-time in the vacuum or a field of fields. And she says this vacuum was filled with particles. And you can imagine just like this immense, dense sea of energy. That's the Big Bang. And she says these energy fluctuations were such that they were, in a sense, bumping into each other, sort of overlapping waves. If you ever, I imagine the ocean, you know, think of the ocean at high tide, overlapping waves. And she says this overlapping wave at that beginning of Big Bang was a flow of information. And she says that's the rise of consciousness right there. Consciousness, she sees as that flow of information. And therefore, what we are saying is that consciousness is the wave side of wave-particle duality, the relationality, the communication in that flow of information, so that the Big Bang is not just like stuff, you know, the past, but the whole Big Bang is alive with consciousness from the beginning. So that life begins with wholeness and consciousness. James Jean, an astrophysicist in 1951, way ahead of his time, said, the universe looks more like a great thought than a great machine. Poor Newton, he wouldn't have been happy. Mind no longer appears as an accident intruder into the realm of matter. Mind may be the creator and governor of matter, so that the quantum phenomena makes it possible to propose that the background of the universe is mind-like. Or as Freeman Dyson said, did the universe know we were coming? So here's the thing. Our consciousness emerges from this wholeness and continues to be part of it. Now just think of that. If our consciousness is emerging from this wholeness and is part of it, then when we shut off our consciousness to the whole, we are no longer in a living whole. And therefore, what accounts for the human mind is active in the universe. I mean, we could probably just sit with this the rest of the afternoon, right? But we're going to go on. So what we are saying is that in and through our minds, we are part of an undivided whole that is our home, the cosmos. Why centering prayer is fundamental to life today in this cosmos is because it's about training and focusing the mind on the heart of life itself. The more we can do that, the more we will find ourselves at home in the cosmos. The more we are, in a sense, centered within ourselves, the more we are centered within the whole that is the cosmic whole. And then, you know, part of that, and we'll come back to that, is again, if consciousness is indeed part of the cosmic whole, then as Henry Stapp said, our human thoughts are linked to nature by non-local connections. Now, that gets really close to home, right? Because I think most of us think most of the time, you know, she doesn't know what I'm thinking. I may not, but the cosmos knows what you're thinking, right? Because the cosmos will respond in some way. So what we choose to do in one region can affect what is true elsewhere in the universe. Why compassion and peacemaking and reconciliation and charity are important is not so that you can be friendly to your neighbor, is because we belong to a whole, and the way we think will be how the whole evolves. And I think we do not realize sometimes the import of the gospel, not for human life alone, the import of the gospel for the whole cosmos. St. Paul says the whole creation is groaning aloud for its new life. The Spirit is groaning aloud. And I think this whole groans today because we have cut ourselves off from the whole. We think we are in privatized thoughts. When I look at the world and its deep polarities, its deep conflicts, its deep fragmentations, we have to ask ourselves, where am I in the midst of this fragmented world? Am I thinking to make whole, or am I, in a sense, not thinking that I am part of the whole? So where your mind is where the rest of the cosmos lies. And, we are saying that we are evolution become conscious of itself. It's not just that, oh, here we are, isn't this wonderful? We are no longer the center of the cosmos, but we are the arrow, as Teilhard said. We are, in a sense, right now, the species that can step apart and reflect on where we're coming from, and we can make choices for the future of the cosmos itself. So our minds do matter to matter. It matters what we do with our minds. It matters what we think and how we think. And if we are internally divided, internally conflicted, if we think, oh, I'll just, be nice and friendly, but in the meantime, inwardly, you might be seething, or you might think, who does she think she is? No, I don't think anyone here would think that. But that kind of inner disconnectedness, that's what we're saying, bears its effect on the world around us. There is no such thing called the world. We are the world. What the world becomes is what we become. Welcome to the world of evolution. We'll take a break and pick it up after the break.